Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Welcome to First Coast Connect. I'm Ann Schindler. Today, student group at Flagler College takes a deep dive into the impacts of political misinformation and media bias. It's a campus event dubbed a Civic Revival, and we'll tell you how you can get involved tonight. Later in the program, a former Jaguar and father of 5 is providing male role models for boys and young men to give them the academic and emotional support he believes they need to succeed. But first, my next guest says our online interactions have made us confidently ignorant, and he's made it his mission to disrupt a system that he says traps us in cultural and political silos. Here to tell us about it is John Gable. He's the co-founder and CEO of AllSides, a media technology company. He's also the keynote at tonight's public forum at Flagler College called The Understanding Crisis, Why We All Can't Seem to Get Along. John Gable, thank you so much for being here.
I'm really excited to be here.
We're also joined by Gabriel James. He's a Flagler College senior. He is also the founder of Pathway America, a bipartisan student-led organization that's hosting tonight's forum. Welcome back, Gabe.
Thanks for having me back, Ann.
So tell us, Gabe, first of all, why you decided to host this event and why you wanted to bring in and invited John Gable in particular.
Well, our organization, Pathway America, has been trying for the last year and a half to find ways to engage students on college campuses. We've been trying it with just our student chapters that have conversations in the classroom. We've been trying it with ways of getting students involved in investigative research and publishing their work online. And one of our newest initiatives is to host an annual forum where we have students, community members, and leaders in incredible industries from incredible companies like AllSides to come and talk about the issues that are pressing our society. And I think I know John through my connections with AllSides as I've worked for their company for several months now, and it was John's incredible charity and to come down and to be a special guest for us at Flagler College.
Yeah. And John, I do want to talk about AllSides and the work that you do, but tell us a little bit about your background, because you have a long Silicon Valley resume and you were in the early stages of what I remember as kind of the beginning of the internet, Netscape Navigator. Tell us a little bit about just kind of how you have been at the very beginning of some of these projects, including Microsoft Office and other developments.
Yeah, well, I actually started working in politics out of college because I wanted to change the world. But then I thought I should get a real job. And so went to business school, and I'd used technology a lot in the 80s in politics. And so I was interested I love building things. And so I was fortunate and got a job offer to go work at Microsoft out of business school. And actually was hired by somebody named Belinda French.
Oh, my goodness.
But there's a funny
Belinda
story
Gates?
about that. And now Melinda Gates.
Maybe back to Melinda.
Sorry, it's a little funny side thing. Is like she asked me the most brilliant questions of anybody I've ever met. And I really love this place. But then she asked me some question. I don't know what it was. And I gave it my best shot. And then she said, I was talking to Bill the other day, and he thought the same thing. And I thought this Melinda French person was lying. She didn't know Bill Gates. She was name dropping. And therefore, who are you? I mean, but okay, I'll let that pass because, everything else about this place is great. And then before I actually move out to Seattle, she's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because she's about to marry Bill Gates. And I'm like, okay, maybe I was wrong. But so it's just kind of a natural evolution. I love building things and I love technology. And I fell in love with Microsoft Excel, particularly when it was on the Mac. That was kind of a change in the way things worked because it was all keyboards. So you could use a mouse and we were talking earlier. My brain seems to think like an Excel grid or a spreadsheet grid now. And so I got to go there, got to work there, and got to join. I was hired to work for Excel, but by the time I got there, we just started Microsoft Office. And so I got to join that team. I learned so much there, but it was a huge organization. And so it wasn't really my thing. I'm arrogant. I want the world to be a different place if I'm there. And I noticed when I was sick for about a week that the stock price for Microsoft went up when I was sick. I was like, well, obviously I'm not having an impact. But that was wonderful. I did a little startup internet, and then I got hired to join Netscape. And that was really kind of where AllSides and this work began in my mind.
Because, I mean, at that point, you're developing and you're working on this tool that allows us to access and to search the internet.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, it provided us an opportunity to delve into this incredible wealth of knowledge. You also, though, pretty early on sensed that it could be a problem.
Yes, and that was very interesting. Those of us who are working on Netscape, we were like totally, we would call it drinking the Kool-Aid. And we totally believe it. It's like, the world will be able to get information to make better decisions about anything. We'll be able to connect with people across the globe and get to know them as individuals rather than stereotypes. And that is in so many ways very true. And the internet's done amazingly wonderful things. But I read a book, Amusing Ourselves to Death by Neil Postman, which was about how news had been corrupted, if you will, by moving from the written word to the television, video world. And I, being a philosophy major, kind of read it as kind of like our brains are being changed and to think differently, being trained to think differently, like a muscle is trained. And I thought, well, what's it going to be like when you get news from the internet? Because that really wasn't the case at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that the attributes of video moved news from a logical past, present, future thing to a emotional, sensational reaction thing, which wasn't such a good thing. And then we also had, so I was thinking, well, the internet, that's about, this information is similar to that. And so I thought it would train us to think by metaphor or by analogy or stereotype. And stereotype thinking is dangerous. That leads to discrimination. So back then I thought, the internet's also probably going to train us to discriminate against each other in new ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I was concerned about that. That's 1997. That was the year I joined Netscape.
Fairly prescient, because that's not something people were talking about.
Well,
much at that
there were
point.
geeks who were writing books a little bit about that, but not kind of the same way that
Yeah.
I was describing. And but in some ways, what I said was absolutely happened. There were a lot of things I never imagined. The whole business model that feeds division and destruction, I never dreamed of that. Neil Postman wrote about that more later. But yeah, unfortunately, that's kind of what happened. I actually said I thought that we'd get rid of old kinds of discrimination, like sexual orientation, racial, all that kind of stuff, and just replace it with new. Well, we kept some of the old stuff and just added new stuff to it.
Talk a little bit about how search engines are in many ways contributing to some of these problems that we're seeing and that we're increasingly recognizing as problems with the internet.
I love the fact that you brought up search engines first, because everybody's so terrified about social media, they miss the dangers, for a long time, miss the dangers of algorithms in search engines. Search at one point, I think it was Eric Schmidt. He was the head of Google at the time. He said, "Well, what you really want to have at Google is you ask a question, it gives you one answer, and for anything of interest where you're supposed to think for yourself, that's not what you want. You want to be able to see the different perspectives and decide for yourself." And it's like that kind of horrified me. And that's essentially like if you do a search on Google on a political topic, you'll frequently get 10 or 20 different results, but they very often will all have the same point of view. And so what we do is we see one point of view, frequently the point of view that will either be the popular point of view that everybody's thinking, or the point of view that their algorithms and math has said, this is what you want to see, or this will make you happier, or this is what you'll click on more so we can make more money. And as a result, we see one point of view, and we become confidently ignorant, as you mentioned earlier. We see that one point of view so many times that we are convinced it's right and 1,000% right, when actually we know less than we did back when I was using microfiche in high school, because I'd have to accidentally run through different points of view to find whatever I was looking for. So that's what I describe by being confidently ignorant. We know less, but we know it so many times that we are overconfident.
Because these search engines are trying to please us in a way.
Yeah, well, that's kind of the business model. And it's not a business model that rewards your empowerment, your understanding. It's a business model that rewards your clicks and your happiness and you wanting to come back again, whether it's a search engine or social media. That's where the money is happening. Now, one of our challenges at AllSides is to create a business model that rewards good behavior. And for us, we have. And I think there's moves, which you could talk about later, that's changing that. But at the end of the day, the people who have the power or the money or crave those things, they're kind of being pulled to not empower us. And so we're becoming more like sheep following the stuff and emotions and information we're being given and reacting to that rather than independent thinking people.
If you're just joining us, we are talking about how technology reinforces bias and exaggerates political difference. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can reach us on air at 904-549-2937, or you can go to firstcoastconnect.org to find other ways to connect with us. Gabe, there has been some research showing that people your age and kind of in your cohort really do want to see a variety of perspectives, that they crave differences of opinion, that they want to feel informed from, all kinds of facets. It also shows that they're maybe not getting that kind of information, even if they feel like they're seeking it, even if they feel like they're wanting it or receiving it. What is it, the situation as you see it, just as a student and somebody that is in the same milieu with other students who are kind of learning about media and bias and politics?
Well, it's excuse me. It's funny. Me and John were talking about this since he's been in town, about how there is sort of some data to suggest that students are that we might be going in the right direction. There's definitely data to suggest that students are craving this, or at least they're understanding what's at stake. This deeply polarized society that we're in, and that there's a deep need for change. And this is one of the best times to get into this industry that we're in, that Pathway America's in, that Bridge USA is in, the depolarization movement. I think that you're right. There's students are not getting what they need. They're not necessarily. There's not a ton of organizations doing what Bridge and Pathway and AllSides do. There's some alliances that have been made between these types of organizations, but there's what I've written about and I call polarization entrepreneurs that often sort of disrupt this movement, this depolarization movement. And it's might be in the way that John was mentioning a moment ago, where it's sort of people are polarized because the internet, desires clicks, and it's not necessarily the goal is to polarize people, but it does as an effect. I think there's also this sort of more malicious intent to intentionally polarize young people, especially, but everybody, in this sort of goal, because polarization is an industry that can create these coalitions that can then create benefit for political campaigns or political action committees or particular corporations that might have unique interests in polarizing people. So I think it's a battle going on right now between the depolarizers and the polarization entrepreneurs that are really clashing heads right now. And there's some people that are losing control with organizations like AllSides and Bridge and Pathway coming in to sort of save the young people from this fate that we think might be befalling them as society becomes more divided.
There's certainly a lot of bad news around this problem, John. And just this morning on NPR, they were talking about the age of kids who are being arrested for terroristic acts. That the age of radicalization now globally is 10, 12, because of the way that kids are being reached through malign forces on the internet. So, I mean, there's certainly a lot to worry about. But I've also heard you say that you are optimistic in some ways. And I wonder if you could share that, why you have that perspective, what history tells us.
Well, just in the history of AllSides. So we started with a prototype in 2012. And there's kind of a thing in Silicon Valley where you want to be on the leading edge, but not on the bleeding edge. If you're too early, it hurts. I kind of joke we were on the bloody stump side of the bleeding edge. We were way too early. It hurt a lot. But when I first started, and my partner and I first went around, we were like talking to people about the problem, and I'd have a half an hour meeting with somebody, and I had to spend 25 minutes explaining that there is a problem with filter bubbles where people are divided and only see one point of view, only people know people just like them. And at the end of it, they would be like, oh, I guess that does cause division. That might be a problem. They kind of intellectually agree, and then they kind of say to themselves, go ahead, enjoy your academic project. I have other things to do. Now, if I spend more than like 30 seconds on the problem, they're like bored because it's so obvious to everybody. And it's kind of like an addict. the first stage to recovering from any kind of addiction is recognizing there's a problem. And so that's a necessary piece. So for me, I've been saying, like, as people now realize this is a real problem, that's step one. And so that's a great step in their recovery.
Sure.
The second step is to actually not just blame it on somebody else. So the thing that I was hearing 4 years ago from college students, everybody was like, well, yeah, there's division. It's their fault. Those other people are the problem with it. Whatever side you're on, it was those other people that were causing all the division. And that, to go back to the analogy, is kind of like an addict saying, well, I could stop drinking for a little bit. I'll just not start drinking till 5 o'clock at night, or I won't have it for breakfast. I won't put bourbon on my Wheaties or something. It's like, that doesn't really solve the problem. So first of all, it's like understanding it's not just them, but also what will actually solve the problem? What are the activities that we can do? So I see people moving from a place where they're like, okay, we're against the division. We want to depolarize the world. Okay, let's do it by blaming the other people and shaming them. Well, that didn't work. Well, let's try something else. Now they're beginning to get more serious about things that actually do work. And the one advantage we have at AllSides is by starting too early, we have a lot of knowledge, experience with what actually does work in the real world to help us get past these problems.
Which is?
A lot of it is the thing I was wrong about at first. So I'm a philosophy major and a math guy. And an information technology guy. So I started with AllSides just trying to show the different perspectives. And that is a very big part of it, because if you only see one point of view, if you only know people just like you, a lot of studies, my favorite one is from University of Colorado recently, but when that happens, we all become much more extreme in whatever we believe, and we become much less tolerant of any other person or idea different than us. So that's just a result of a very filtered information bubble. But the filtered relationship bubble, us knowing each other and being able to talk with each other and connecting as people, that's actually a bigger deal. That's actually a larger driver. And this is what was great when I met Joan Blades. So she's a good friend. She's now a co-founder of like our later iteration of AllSides. She was the founder of MoveOn.org. So she's very traditionally left. I actually worked for Mitch McConnell, which is a Republican.
And George W. Bush.
And George Bush. So that makes me very popular in San Francisco. But we are like best friends. And she is like, and so we kind of redid AllSides. It's a technology company. And she's one of our co-founders. And we've done a TED Talk together. And we start with our differences. It's like she grew up in Berkeley. So we put picture of Berkeley and how they voted in the Clinton and the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump election, and then we put up where I started in Stearns, Kentucky, a small coal mining town, the Danube National Forest, close to the Kentucky-Tennessee border, and very different place, very different voting. And what's funny is after this TED Talk, went pretty well, we thought, the biggest thing people walked away with was like, wow, they really are friends. It's like we said all these great, intelligent things, but it's like that's what really people took away.
Wow.
And that used to be a more normal thing. So 20 years ago, it wasn't unusual for a Republican and Democrat to be married. Now it's like, if you look at Pew Research over the years, that's hardly ever happens. Back then, you hardly ever had racial marriages. Now that's a very normal thing. Yeah. So we kind of replaced a little bit, to some extent, one prejudice that still exists with another prejudice. But it's the relationship between people and our ability to be curious and understand each other that drives everything, because we tend to make decisions emotionally first and through relationship first, and then our brains come in. So you have to focus on the relationship piece as well.
In terms of relationships, since you bring up that dynamic, particularly within marriages, I wonder how, obviously you have a background as a Republican. You also worked for the Republican Executive Committee, I believe,
for the
RNC.
Yeah, maybe, for the RNC, yeah.
And so you are familiar with kind of that world. Mm-hmm. You've also managed to bridge that divide in your friendships, particularly in this case. How has the current president maybe changed or altered that ability? Because obviously we all have heard of, or even perhaps know of, families that have been riven by polarization over this particular person. And they may not even have different politics necessarily, but when it comes to this one individual, friendships, all kinds of alliances have been torn apart.
Well, it's interesting because I been thinking about what is the real driver to the divisions we're suffering in the United States. But it's happening worldwide. Brexit had the same kind of problems. And so though Trump drives me nuts, and actually Biden drove me nuts too, I think that we're a little bit too U.S. focused on personality when I actually think the main driver to the divisions we're feeling, those are more symptoms to the problem. They're not the cause of the problem. Because otherwise you wouldn't see the same kind of divisions before Trump got into office in Europe and across the world. So what's really driving it, if you look at like all sorts of different ways of data to map how societies become more polarized, and disagreement's fine. It's really effective polarization, where like you and I may disagree on immigration or the environment. The problem is if I think that, oh, because you think differently than I am, therefore you're evil and I won't work with you on anything, and it breaks those relationships. That's effective polarization. When you measure that and look at that around the world, it happens to correlate very nicely or horribly with the adoption of technology, the kind of stuff I worked on. That as conversations and communications move to the online world, that polarization tracks like a mirror image on graphs. And so I think it's the way that we communicate with each other and the way that we get information that has been the real driver. And that Trump is just a symptom of that core problem. Or if you're on the other side, the breakages from Hillary or Biden on that. I think that politicians tend to get in front of something that's already happening and say, "Follow me," but they're really just kind of reflecting a problem or what's happening in society.
So, Gabe, if we're talking about the student experience when it comes to campus polarization, I mean, obviously Pathways is designed to bring some bipartisan reflection to these debates and to invite all sides in to talk about these issues. There's, also a different campus movement, and we've talked about on this program before, the Turning Point and sort of the Charlie Kirk-led initiative to, I think in his mind and in his description, also foster bipartisan dialogue. How do you see the work that you're doing relative to the work that his organization did before his assassination and continues to do after his death?
Well, I was extremely fascinated with Turning Point USA a couple years ago when they started showing up on everyone's social media feeds. They're extremely effective in their model to reach out to students and to get them involved and participating in their movement. However, when I learned more about Turning Point, the thing that turned me off about them was their exclusivity of their organization, meaning they were trying to turn people into conservatives. They may foster the bipartisan dialogue. Of course, free speech was a tenet of theirs, and Charlie would go to college campuses and encourage that dialogue between across party lines. But ultimately, the mission of Turning Point was to bring people to the conservative party, to bring people to a sort of religious part of the conservative party. And I'm not a conservative, nor would I associate myself necessarily with being a liberal or Democrat or Republican. I grew up in a deeply polarized household with parents who believed totally opposite things, a liberal mother, a conservative father. And I wanted to see an organization that fostered the dialogue, the discourse, and the sort of platform to bring voices together without trying to bring them to a certain conclusion about their own beliefs, like Turning Point does, rather letting them learn from people, letting them sort of learn about themselves and the ideas of others, while also embracing and renewing a sort of love for America. And Bridge USA has done a lot of the bridging and the dialogue, and there's organizations like that already. However, Pathway America wants to bring that love for America, that wants to destroy that stigma that you can't wave an American flag without being called a far-right conservative. We want to demolish that stigma. We want to make people proud of living in this country, proud of who we are, and acknowledge the faults, acknowledge some of the failures, but also acknowledge many of our successes. and have liberals, leftists, conservatives, the right come together and understand we might disagree, and we are free to disagree, and we should still be able to be friends and have our community get-togethers, even if we're sort of divided on certain issues. But we should all be united under a common belief that we are American and we're happy to be in this country. So that's sort of where we differ from Turning Point, I would say.
Mm-hmm. John, I do want to talk about just your work when it comes to analyzing media bias.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to the AllSides website, you'll sort of instantly see a headline broken into sort of three parts. You'll have the version that's most conservative, you'll have the middle, sort of most neutral version, and then the leftist most version. And people can see how are these stories being told. So we actually just put up a chart of a ranking that your organization has done of left, sort of center left, center right organizations that produce the news. How do you provide this analysis? What does it provide for people who are looking at it? How does it help them, escape or at least understand the filter bubble that they're in?
Yes, the key for rating bias is to avoid our own biases from determining what the rating is. Because at the end of the day, bias is a subjective thing. Whether something's left, center, or right kind of depends on a subjective judgment of what those things are. And so what we did was we actually survey people across America that are representative of left, center, or right themselves. And we show them a lot of content, a lot of headlines from one source. And we say, overall, do you think it's a little bit more left or a little bit more center or a little bit more right? And by the way, center is not always neutral. It may just be a balance of the two. And it's not always better either, because there are some good ideas from both the right and left that sometimes the center misses. So I'm a much bigger fan of multiple perspectives than like the quote-unquote neutral perspective, because everybody's biased no matter how hard we try. And professional journalists like you work really hard on being balanced, but we all fall short. And we're all biased by what we know and what we don't know. And our life experience biases us. And so, but in order to get through that, how do we empower people to really decide for themselves? And the biggest challenge in news is that people often don't trust it, or they aren't sure that the information is fair. And so what we did was, just by showing the different perspectives, we first of all give you the full story, so you can actually decide for yourself. And secondly, that helps credibility, because people realize that we're not hiding one perspective or the other. We're actually putting it right in front of you. And so we're trusting and respecting the reader rather than serving them by telling them what to think, is kind of the way we think about it.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt that thought, but it's almost not just like you're showing them that you're unbiased, but you're sort of showing them these universals that are true across the various stories. And so it kind of allows them to see like this fact that's being reported, even though there's different perspectives on how it's presented, is an actual fact, and maybe helps them understand that there is reliable information in the media, whether it's left, right, or center.
Absolutely right. And there's also shows the other stuff. So I remember before we started AllSides, I was kind of trying to figure out how to solve this problem. And so I spent a lot of time watching Fox and MSNBC and watching the most extreme things back and forth. And I remember during Occupy New York, or Occupy Wall Street, that I saw a video of somebody from Fox describing how there was people peeing on the ground and destruction to the ground, and just really kind of disgusting stuff and pushing. And then somebody at MSNBC, who I think was standing within maybe 10 feet of the Fox person, described how a innocent old elderly lady was there protesting. She was pushed around by the police, and kind of scary in a certain way. And I think that both things were absolutely true. But if you only look at one set of facts and skip the others, you get a very different idea of what's going on. And so they both said something that was true, but gave a very different overall impression because they didn't get that full story.
Yeah, and that is often the problem. I want to ask you, because we do have another graphic. This is from the League of Women Voters, and I want to talk to you about ranking the accuracy, because they do both side to side, left and right, but they also categorize some as just straight up unreliable. You'll see things on the bottom there. My eyesight probably isn't good enough to pick them up. Daily Caller, or Can you read me something from the left there? I don't.
Well, they have like
InfoWars is on there,
Patriobotics and
Inquirer.
Infowars and
At any rate, those
Alternate,
are right.
Daily Cause.
Why
Yeah.
is it that AllSides doesn't attempt to do a media bias also with a reliability element?
Yeah, what we find is that bias seems to be consistent. So we first started to just try to show people different points of view. How can you do that with breaking news? And so our hypothesis was like, well, maybe if we spend a lot of time understanding where their leanings are, then if we just show, once we establish their bias, will that be predictable about how they're going to cover the story that's going to break in 5 minutes? Turned out to be very predictable, like disturbingly accurate. Like I was disappointed at how well we can predict how somebody is going to cover something that hasn't broken yet based on how they covered things in the past. And so we used that back 13 years ago as a way to immediately give you different perspectives on news as it broke. Because that was a challenge. How do you do that? Now, what we're finding is on the accuracy part, there are some groups that are consistently making stuff up, and there are extremes that should be pointed out. But generally, we're finding the accuracy is not as consistent. So, like, we find that left groups tend to be accurate when the information goes to their side, but not so accurate on the other way. And it's left and right and all that. It's like the accuracy is not consistent. It just isn't. New York Times is a very strong news organization, but when it goes against their narrative, they miss stuff, or they will actually spread things that are just misinformation because they believe something that wasn't verified. And there are lots of examples of that. And I'm not trying to pick on them. You see that on other sides.
The Iraq War is a pretty good example.
Exactly. And so the accuracy seems to be more tied to their bias and the information they're seeing that fits their narrative. They seem to be more driven by their narrative often than their accuracy. Now, there are organizations that really work hard to get it right, and some take extra time to do that, which is great. And we appreciate other organizations pointing that out. But we wanted to, the thing that drives it the most consistently is actually their bias.
It's bias. Gabe, I just want to ask you about tonight's event. So this is open to the public. It's going to involve yourself, John. You're going to be having a conversation about this. I believe that the president of Flagler College, John Delaney, is also going to be a participant in that. So it's titled Why We All Can't Seem to Get Along. What is it that you expect people will get out of this tonight if they attend?
Well, I want to go back to something John said a couple moments ago about how social media and being, too like chronically online can often foster great division, and amongst young people especially. This is an event, in like most events, a lot of events are online nowadays, but this is, of course, an in-person event that's going to feature John giving a dialogue on the understanding crisis, and then a conversation between students, leaders of the institution of Flagler College. It's not going to be President Delaney, unfortunately, but we have another great guest stepping in for him. And John Gable, the leader of AllSides, an organization doing that in the real world, trying to repair these sort of divisive tendencies that of the internet. And people are going to be able to come. They're going to be able to ask questions. They're going to be able to see how a real conversation between professionals and between students should be hosted and should be facilitated. And I think it's going to be a sort of turnkey moment for our community here in town. We're also giving students the opportunity to attend a roundtable today where they'll be able to discuss media, polarization, certain controversial topics, which I think is going to be great for them as well. And that's going to be in our Lewis Auditorium at Flagler College. The doors open at 5 p.m. tonight, and the registration is available at pathwayamerica.org if anybody is looking to come to that and get that experience today.
And I think we've also got a link on our website at firstcoastconnect.org. John, is there anything for people who maybe aren't able to attend tonight that is sort of immediately actionable that you would advise us to do, that you would suggest if we're looking to recognize if we're in our own filter bubble? What could people do themselves?
I love that question. First of all, President Delaney, unfortunately, he's fighting a bug, and I was looking forward to meeting him, so that's why he's not joining us tonight. So there are lots of things we can do. And so I'll just list a few different types of things. One thing is on our site or at Living Room Conversations, livingroomconversations.org. There are all sorts of conversation guides have been very carefully structured. So you can actually invite a friend who has a different point of view than you on a topic. And maybe you invite two friends and your other friend might invite two other friends. And the 6 of you can get together in a living room and follow this conversation guide. There are 150 there on whatever topic you like. And what happens during these great conversations, I like to describe it as you accidentally discover the humanity of the other person, who of course is totally wrong about whatever issue you're talking about. And it changes the conversation. And it changes the relationship to like a collaborative understanding and a curiosity one. And what we found, and we do this online, we actually did a national roundtable on political violence with Newsweek online, and we had 678 people attend, and we broke them in small mismatched groups, and they talked with each other. And what we discovered, and third parties have studied on our using these kind of conversation guides, is that you can measure how people are more open to different ideas afterwards. And you can measure basically this reduction in affective polarization and their curiosity and being more tolerant. And then they even went back 2 months later and saw that change in attitude had remained. And so what's interesting is that human beings are wired to connect. For all the worries we have about how we're wired to divide and hate each other, we're really wired to connect as well. And so just given that opportunity, people do connect. So that's just one way to do it. And the other way to do it is just focus on local action. I love your question about action. I'm really tired of cocktail parties or trying to win an argument. I actually want to have impact on society and people.
Tell us that website one more time, and we'll make sure we link to it on our website.
livingroomconversations.org.
Okay.
You can also find this at AllSides too, at allsides.com. But it's for the conversation guide, I would go straight to livingroomconversations.org.
Well, it's a fascinating conversation. We're going to have to leave it right there, but the event is tonight. You can find information on our website. John Gable, Gabriel James, thanks so much for coming in today and talking about this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for inviting us.
For having us.
All right. Up next, a former Jaguar linebacker advocates for young boys and men. We'll tell you about his nonprofit, Level the Playing Field Academy. Welcome back. Well, former Jaguars linebacker Lonnie Marts Jr. is the father of 5 kids. But when he was growing up, his own father wasn't around that much. The experience inspired him to found Level the Playing Field Leadership Academy, and he's here to tell us why. Lonnie Marts Jr., thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Ann.
We're also joined by a program mentee and First Coast High School senior, Jakari Matthews. Jakari, thanks for being here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
So, Lonnie, you had a decade-long career more in the NFL. You obviously played with the Jaguars. You've made Jacksonville your home. But you grew up in a single-parent household, and, you had some advantages that some other kids didn't have, and you had some that maybe disadvantages that other kids didn't have. So tell us about how that impacted your life and your way of thinking.
Honestly, it did not impact me too much. My mother gave me a lot of structure. We had a pact that I would go to high school, I would get my diploma, and I would also go to college and get a degree. And when I got that degree, I walked off that stage and handed it to her because that was something that we set out our goals and that we did it. And so it wasn't until I finished my career that I understood how much weight she carried as a single mom. And that was the reason why I started Level the Playing Field. I could see there are so many young men out there like myself. And obviously Jacksonville has done a lot for me. They accepted me when I was at the end of my career and I finished here. My kids are grown, so I want to give back. So this is my give back to Jacksonville.
How has your own fathering evolved and how does it, what's the interplay between kind of the role you play with your own family and the role you play with your nonprofit?
Well, my wife is a big proponent of what we do in the house. As you can understand, playing 11 years in the NFL, I wasn't home much. And when I was probably part of the kids that she was teaching at the time. And so we've parented our kids for 30 years, 33. My oldest is 33. Okay. We parented her for 33 years, and we've learned a lot. And so in that, we use a lot of that learning, of that teaching, those lessons with our boys in level the playing field. And it comes to pass every day.
So, Jakari, you are part of the program. Tell us, first of all, how you came into it and what you've gotten out of it.
So how I came into the program, it was around 8th grade after like football practice or something. And, school's starting. So they had a whole bunch of stands and Mr. Lonnie was there. So I knew my mom was going to try to sign me up for as much as she could. I was praying she didn't. And sure enough, she signed me up. And from then, that's been like 5 years. So I'm the oldest in the program. It's really good. It teaches about a lot about self-mastery, expressing your feelings, and the mentors we have, they're very good and very reliable, relatable. It's a lot. It's a really good program, and it teaches you a lot of good stuff. What not to do, molding you into a good young man and giving you responsibility as well as keeping you accountable.
And so what does that look like in practice? Are you going to places and meeting people? Are you engaging in some sort of activities? What kind of work are you doing, and what kind of advice are you getting?
They give us a lot of influential people to talk to. Every other Saturday they'll have us meetings with everybody there, and then have people talk to us, do different activities, and they just talk a lot about growing and keeping you safe.
And we know that there's some camp element to this because some people watching our live stream will have seen some pictures of events. What is it, Lonnie, that, the Academy, who is it open to? How can people participate if they want to get involved?
It's actually, it's boys. We commit to boys 10 to a decade. So boys come into our program every year. We take 15 boys in every year, but they're from 10 to 12 years old, and they're fatherless. Their fathers are not a part of their lives. And so we look for boys that are usually in elementary to middle school, and we go around to different elementary, middle schools, and we find boys mom has to be engaged because we want to make sure that the boy has more than just us. It's mom, us, and the boy that is working. So we're just running alongside mom to make sure that the young man has everything he needs.
And do you also need mentors? Do you need people to participate?
Yes, we do. We need mentors. We're always looking for good, excellent men, because we know that what's on the mentor's life will flow off onto the boy's life, and we want our boys to be good men.
It must be tough to get a long-term commitment from everybody on that.
It is, but if you don't put it out there, you'll never get anyone to answer. So we make sure that we keep saying it over and over again, and things like this allow us to get that.
Well, it's called Level the Playing Field Leadership Academy. Lonnie Marts Jr. runs it. Thank you for being here. Jakari Matthews, good luck on all. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Up next, local students honor a Jacksonville silent filmmaker with a film of their own.
Terrell Hogan Law.
I'm Wayne Hogan. Highway, hospital, home, work. Where injuries happen can make a difference in the law and the outcome.
More at terrellhoganlaw.com. Congaree and Pen, dedicated to agriculture and culinary endeavors, offering field-to-fork dining and outdoor experiences on over 300 acres. Sip, dine, explore. Information at congareeandpen.com.
On the next Fresh Air, investigative journalist Vicki Ward spent decades investigating sexual predator Jeffrey Epstein. She'll talk about the revelations in the Epstein files, the 3 million pages of documents that have been released to the public, and the implications for the survivors. Join us.
Today at noon on WJCT News 89.9.
AI is adapting more and more human capabilities every year.
Not something I expected, and I don't think it's something really anyone in the field, if they're being honest, could say they expected things to go this fast.
But does that mean AI is thinking like us? Our series Brainwaves continues on the next On Point.
Today at 11, here on WJCT News 89.9.
Religious leaders of all faiths are pushing back against the Trump administration's immigration policies. Many houses of worship have also become places of protest. The link between religion and political activism has a long history. How is that relationship changing in response to this moment? That conversation next time on 1A.
Today, starting at 10 on WJCT News 89.9.
Welcome back. Jacksonville movie maker Richard Norman made his last feature film in 1926, but he continues to inspire young filmmakers today. Students at the Performance Academy have made a new short. It merges silent film traditions with modern themes. Here to talk about it is student Jackson Boatwright, the film's director. Jackson, welcome to First Coast Connect.
Hi, thank you for having me.
We're also joined by Dylon Berryhill, an actor in the show and executive producer. Welcome, Dylon.
Thank you for having me.
Nathan Boatwright, actor portraying Richard Norman himself. Nathan, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And Catherine McAvoy, she's the executive director of the Performance Academy. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, how are you, Ann?
So I'm great. So this is sort of a film within a film. And I wonder if you can, Dylon, sort of talk about that choice. It is a film that is partly a documentary of this process, and then it's partly this short film that has been made that is this tribute to Richard Norman.
Yes, so the documentary part was about how everything started, and we talked to the director or the president of the Richard Norman place, and she gave us the background and how he made it and became the film and director of Norman Studios.
And that's Barbara Wingo.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And the film part was we wanted to show how I wanted to make our own twist on how Richard Norman started everything, and we wanted to show how we made our we wanted to show how we made our on silent film and show everybody what we could do on how he did it.
And so when it comes to just directing this, Jackson, are you directing all of it, the documentary and the short silent film?
Yeah, I was directing both.
And how did you come up with the idea of the silent film itself, the plot of it, how you wanted to tell a modern silent film? It's very unusual.
So after we started filming, after we got the documentary, and these two and a couple other people, a part of the project, we sat around in the black box at TPA, and
At
we
The Performance
Academy.
Academy.
Yeah.
Where is that located?
On Beach Boulevard.
Okay.
In St. Nicholas area.
So yeah, we created the script and we created storyboards for it, and then I guess we just started filming, and it was pretty cool because we're all friends behind the camera and stuff. So
And a couple of you are brothers. So Nathan, you play Richard Norman. What did you learn about him to bring to this role?
So it's a very intriguing and interesting thing about Richard Norman. I did a lot of research because I'm portraying him in our monologues at the premiere, and it's a very cool thing to see the history of Jacksonville and how big of a part he had in it, and being able to do research, all the stuff that he did, giving these people chances, him being one of the biggest people back in the day in 1920 for silent film studios when it was a big thing in Jacksonville, basically Hollywood today back then. And he was one of the main people for it, especially for race films. And being able to portray somebody like that, it's very, very fun.
Yeah. Catherine, you end up in the film too. Was that always part of the plan? How did that happen?
No, they popped in my office one day and wanted to interview me, and yes, I told them not to use that part, but because I cried on the film, when they started asking me
Why?
questions, because we were talking about Richard Norman and the impact he had with race films, which was giving Black actors a chance to portray who they really were instead of the mimicry that they so often did. And so they were talking about what was Richard Norman's motive, and because Richard Norman is a white man and he was giving Black actors a chance. And so the question was, what's behind all this, and what's their motive, and is it money, or is it, image, or what was it? And that's so we at the Performance Academy, we're arts for all, and we provide regardless of who wants to learn, and we give opportunity to people who wouldn't otherwise get opportunity. And so sometimes the white savior comment comes out, and that's what upset me when they popped into my office and said, "We want to interview you today, and here are our questions." And I was a little surprised at my reaction because I was taken off guard by it.
Well, it is such an interesting project. The film is called Fade to Black. The film within a film is called Mute. It's really interesting that you guys chose this subject. I think it's fascinating that you're supporting these kids. So this is February 13th. You will be able to see both of those films. There's also a Q&A with the production crew, and then a series of Black history presentations by individual students.
Right. That's when he portrays Richard Norman live, is we do the Black heroes and people that impacted the Black history.
All right. That's at Mocha Jacksonville, as we said, Friday, February 13th at 6:30 p.m. Catherine McAvoy, Jackson Boatwright, Nathan Boatwright, and sorry, I've got your name wrong. Dylon Berryhill. Dylon Berryhill. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you.
All right. You guys have a great afternoon. And that's our program. Thanks for listening. Please join us tomorrow when we talk to longtime conservative columnist and commentator David Brooks ahead of his Jacksonville appearance. I'm Ann Schindler. You've been listening to First Coast Connect on WJCT News 89.9.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided by Baptist Health and the North Florida TPO.
North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjacks.com.
Dependable, intelligent, local. WJCT News 89.9, where Jacksonville turns for trusted news and insight every morning.